I think the government of Belize, whatever the party, should in fact set up a kind of an expatriate department in some ministry whose sole job is to identify, track down and stay in touch with these people so that even if they don't end up repatriating to Belize, you get the benefits of their expertise. You make it so that they contribute to the country. And it's not that you have to have sent them abroad. They didn't send me abroad, but I don't hold any resentment about it. I'm happy to go back, and I mean to the same degree that I can go to, as I have done, to Temple University in Tokyo and talk to students in class and give lectures and so on. And I was invited by a Canadian professor who teaches a course there. Well, that's Japan, for heaven's sake. I have nothing to do with Japan. Nothing wrong with Japan. I like the Japanese. I like Japan, but I'm more than happy to do the same thing for the country where I originated. You know, and I think it's a fairly easy fix if somebody paid attention. This is where my suggestion that you actually designate a person whose job it is to sort this out. And so you need, I'm not saying everybody has to get everything he wants. Sure. If he had said to me, well, why don't we get you into a training program aiming toward an ambassadorship and so on. But what you do really is you end up forfeiting, as a country, your best lights, and then the resentment sets in. Why gone so long? And all this business, he hasn't been back, and he's not helping his country. And I had an interesting. I have this kind of international accent that is just a product of having traveled to 99 countries in my case, and having reported from 4 dozen, and having lived in numerous places, even if just for a few months, never mind years. And so I have this sound, if you like, that I know is people are going, where is he from? What's his name? And so you get this sort of well, you think you're better than we are, and all this business. I was in Belize fairly recently, and somebody said to me, "Do you understand Creole?" And I said, "Of course I understand Creole." "Well, you don't talk it." And I said, it's not because I have anything against Creole, but I've been gone a long time, and I live in Asia. You're not going to find any Belize people in Asia. So it's obvious. My circle, it's easy if you're in the States, for once, but my circle tends to be sort of English football players and Irish rugby players, and I move in that sort of a different diaspora, and Chinese and Japanese and all that, and so. And I learned Spanish, I learned French, and so it goes into
the thing represents your geography
and how you sound, and also how you look at the world.
That's right.
And you change a bit, and I find, unfortunately, it's been a while now, that people tended to think occasionally that they attribute certain motives to you. And so people start saying, he probably thinks he's better than we are. Why don't you ask me? I mean, why are you assuming that? I mean, just because one speaks a certain way doesn't in and of itself constitute this notion that you think you're better than anybody else. You end up with a certain distancing effect, and people create unnecessary walls between the person who has left and the people who have remained, and I have to be clear, and I have to acknowledge that it took me a long time to return. Why? Because I was building my career, And building one's career didn't mean, require or even necessitate rushing back to Belize for holidays. And so time off I would be in some other part of the world. I mean, I covered the war in Somalia. I was in Iraq covering the war for a year and a half. I covered the big tsunami in 2004, December, that took me to Thailand, Indonesia and Sri Lanka. I was recently covering the nuclear meltdown and tsunami in Fukushima, Japan. I've been writing about the monarchical succession in Thailand. I've been writing about the Islamicization of Indonesia and Malaysia. I've been in Philippines recently writing about the extrajudicial killings that have been spearheaded by the new president Rodrigo Duterte, who has taken an uncompromising approach in his fight against drugs, where he has instructed the police and the military and indeed ordinary people to shoot to kill. These are the sort of stories that I've been doing. I covered the drug cartels for 3 years in Mexico City, during which time I got my life threatened. I was at my office one day and I was working on an expose of a cartel called the Zetas. Z or Z, depending where you're from. ETAS. Phone rings, Lennox Samuels, and the fellow was extremely nice, the caller, and very avuncular. It might have been my uncle calling me to wish me a happy day. And he says, we understand you're doing an expose of the Zetas. And, for a long time we were concerned and wondering what to do about it. And we were upset and apprehensive. And then we realized, what difference does it make? You're not going to live long enough to publish that. And he rang off with me holding onto the phone line.
Very diplomatically, right?
Yes, very nice. But we sprang into action. We hardened the bureau. We had bulletproof glass, and we had motion detectors and all that. And I finished writing that story not in Mexico. I flew to Manila, Philippines to get away from the threat. And I wrote the end of the story there and published it from a very long distance.
Wow.
This sort of thing doesn't jibe with rushing to Belize for the 10th of September holiday and marches and so on, because you're building a very considerable career. And so it's a whole different thing. And I think people don't really appreciate it. And I've had a very interesting, one might even say exciting, but certainly difficult and often dangerous career. I spent time, I acquired a sort of civilian version of PTSD, which the soldiers have routinely, and they're famous for that, infamous. From my time in Iraq, I developed vertigo and claustrophobia and vision problems from all the glare and all the heat, because it's 120 degrees in the desert in Iraq, 130 degrees, all that loud banging from bombs and so on. And so I went from being this daring-do, swashbuckling reporter, jumping out of airplanes and being in sniper vehicles and being in Humvees, to one who currently, if I'm sitting on an aeroplane in a middle seat between two people rather than an aisle seat, I get claustrophobia. This is all post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I don't say that with any particular appeal for sympathy or anything like that. It just is. Yes. And it does change your life. I can't go into an iron mine anymore, as I might have done in the past, because the space is too tight. And so you do all the things. I used to like roller coasters. I can't do them anymore. It's too high and it's too it too vertigo-inducing. So we all have our issues, but I think for the purposes of Belize, I think there's a way to get people back if you work with them parallelly from the time they leave until the time they acquire whatever skills and diplomas they will have.
Countries have done just that.
Yes, countries have done that. That's exactly right.
Exactly
so this is not it's not brain surgery. It's just something that needs to be planned and organized and paid attention to.
Yes.
I'm going to go political for a moment and say that I think part of the problem is a lot of the funds and attention that should be paid to causing this sort of return to the motherland to work ends up in the pockets of politicians. They're far more concerned with looking after themselves than worrying about bringing people back to contribute to the overall welfare of the country.
That is a fact, indeed. You speak truth to power right there.
I interviewed Margaret Thatcher.
Wow.
In Dallas.
The Iron Lady.
The Iron Lady. And back to the accent issue. I walked in and she clearly assumed that I was British.
Wow.
But what did she say to me? She said, "Young man, what are you doing in the wilds of Texas when you should be at home in England helping to sort out your country?" You see what I mean? She was interested in me thinking I was one of hers to be help, back home.
There you go.
Helping and things and so on. I never heard anybody from Belize say that.
George repatriation.
George Price came home, but he came close, but he didn't follow through with anything because he's already committed big jobs to cronies. You see, a lovely man. Absolutely.
Father of the nation.
But wrong-headed in my
faults
view when it came to that sort of thing.
He's not infallible at all.
I did hear Dean, if you're interested, if you're listening, if you see this, I hear that the last time I was in Belize, that Prime Minister Dean Barrow had put out some feelers trying to find out where I was. Unfortunately, that was the day before I was scheduled to leave. And so we never connected. I don't know what it was about, or if it was just a courtesy call. I would have been happy to meet with him. I think, if I may segue into from criticism to what might happen, I think that absent people like me having gone back to spend the intervening decades working in Belize, I think the thing to do possibly now is to tap us, to say, right, you didn't work here through your career, but could we have you come down here and do seminars and courses and visiting professors and imparting what you have learned to Radio Belize or to BTS or whatever, news stations.
Channel 7
because there's a certain level
University of Belize Journalism Department.
Quite so, and I've yet to hear from anybody. I hear from American universities saying, I went to Africa to teach journalists in Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Kenya. And I was in South Africa, and that was done through USAID as well as the United Nations. Well, what's to stop Belize from reaching out to people like me, particularly once you have tracked us down through people like you, and say, look, do you mind coming down here for 6 months, a year, whatever, and spending time at the University of Belize and helping people become more professional in how they prosecute whatever they're prosecuting, journalism or science and so on and so forth. I have a request now from a newspaper in India. I have nothing to do with India. To go there and help sort out their journalists. I have a request from a news company which does television and print in Sri Lanka. I would as soon do that sort of thing for my own country than to go off and do it for India or Sri Lanka or Thailand or what have you. But
as you speak about
but
that,
nobody has made the outcome. And I don't see, if I may, why I should be expected to reach out, particularly since, you know, these people may not know who I am. I end up being rebuffed. Well, who do you think you are? We don't know. You get lost in the shuffle. So I would just say that I would certainly be prepared to do that and take a break from my own career and go down there and spend a certain amount of time, help them sort out our young talent.
Very much so. Very much so. This is Belizean Legends, and I am Bilal Morris, and we're speaking with. I'm going to just use the word on him because define legends how you want it. The legendary Lennox Samuels. And what this brother is imparting to us today is long overdue, and we've been waiting for this kind of information to come out, especially his take on the whole diaspora. Lennox, the Belize ambassador, the late Belize ambassador of trade, the Caribbean and Africa, Bert Tucker. This man has worked with Michael Manley. After his graduation from UWI, he has worked with Maurice Bishop of Grenada. Top economist.
I know of him. Yeah.
And he, in 1990, the Honorable Philip Goldson mentioned that Belizeans in the diaspora should play a very pivotal role in the development of Belize. And the coming to power of the United Democratic Party government in 1984, for the very first time, they send him across Africa, sustainable development programs, and this is one of our trained scholars, like yourself. And he would come home from time to time, and Said Musa would bring him in as the Minister of Economic Development. He would work developing 5-year development plans, and and then go back to the United Nations. And he was all over the world, and there was always this criticism. Yeah, why is it that he's out there? He's Ghana, this man meet Jerry Rawlings, Dinga Lumumba, the great Belizean, who he would tell these stories to us about his travels and his great exploits.
Right, so, yeah.
And he brought a program from the United Nations to the Belize government through the work of Minister Philip Goldson, who was Minister of Social Development, called Top 10, Transfer of Knowledge Through Expatriate Nationals. Just exactly what you're talking about, Lennox Samuels. How can we then tap into the diaspora and bring those Belizeans, the Belizean diaspora, and bring those Belizeans for a month or two, pay all their expenses in terms, give them a home, a vehicle, and just, they don't, you don't have to bring them in to live there. No, we are not going to become, Belizeans are not going to be coming home after achieving such quality of life.
I'm afraid that's true, yes.
The country is not developing. So why should I come home to that? But can you bring me in on a month? United Nations going to provide all the finances because they're trying to help these developing countries develop. And he brought it in, and Minister Goldson tried to run with it, but met serious opposition in his own government. Yeah. And we asked, why is it that governments, after people like that, labor so hard out there, as Ambassador Bert Tucker did? And then he brought it up again in 2011, the Homecoming Conference, where he was, as the ambassador now under the Dean Barrow government, brought in by Wilfred Sellington as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, going in and salting persons like me and says, Bilal, I want you to see if we can get all those Belizeans out there in the diaspora from all the states. We're having this thing called the Homecoming Conference. It was, the whole proposal was just laid out, contacting all the ambassadors and consul generals, and it was about to go down. Yeah. It was about to happen, and then something happened where it died in childbirth, so to speak. It's like, what happened? They don't want to do it anymore. They said that that money can go to something else. And so we develop programs, 5-year development programs, this, that, but it get pushed to the back burner. But whenever the diaspora issue starts to come up, we hear people say they will never give Belizeans in the diaspora a chance to come home and make a difference because they fear us. I'll put that in quotes now. Simon, speak about that if you can.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think it's really fueled by not just fear so much as I think resentment. There is, I think, amongst a number of people who stayed at home, this sort of feeling of abandonment. Well, you all went off and sought your fortune elsewhere. You never gave a fig about Belize, you never gave us a thought, you never returned. The hell with you, why should we seek you out now? But if we revert to what I said earlier, a good portion of the reason people like us left and didn't return is because we were actually engaged in looking after ourselves and pushing ourselves and trying to achieve absent support from home.
Yes, yes.
And so you can't very well expect people to be running back home when they don't know how they're going to get back to school, how they're going to pay for that term or this book and so on and so forth. So a lot of us, myself included, had part-time jobs, you know. That summer or that Christmas time that I'm supposed to be in Belize, I'm working.
That's right.
On campus, because that's what you're restricted to. And I think it takes a certain enlightenment, a sense of proportion, and a deep well of goodwill and a certain maturity on the part of the people who are at home, who are in a position to organize the process through which this diaspora crowd their talents are tapped, and you sort of have an IV drip that through which their contributions are bled into Belize society. And so it takes a certain visionary person and a certain kind of person who is not bogged down in or concerned by a certain amount of resentment. You know, I can tell you that for me, if somebody reached out to me, I'm happy to provide my emails and my telephone numbers and so on. And if somebody said to me, look, we'd like you to come for 6 months and be a visiting professor at the University of Belize to help us develop a muscular journalism program that's world class.
Yes.
That's not run by people who frankly haven't been journalists. You know, they went somewhere and got a course or two, and then you're teaching people. I would be extremely amenable to that. To say to my employer, or in my case, I'm more flexible since I'm largely a consultant. You know what? I'm going to go down to Belize for 6 months, and
But they would go and bring a white American in, or
white or Cuban or whatever.
Yeah, they would bring in, and they have done that, but they would not seek out their own.
And the reason is the last bit of what you said, seeking out. They don't have a database of the Owen Tuckers and Lennox Samuels and Calvin Flowers and whoever who left 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, so that they have that pipeline and you can reach out and say, right, in a meeting at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Education or whatever, why don't we contact Bilal Morris or whoever, as opposed to let's see if we can get somebody from the University of London to come down and do this or that, or somebody in Cuba, or somebody in Minnesota, and so on and so forth. We bring the same skills, and if not better skills, you know. And then here's some things though. You've got to really. There are so many things on the ground that become impediments as well. For example, poor health service. Do you know the number of people I know who don't even want to holiday in America, in Belize, natives, because they're terrified of going down there and falling ill and dying through incompetent service or lack of service. There are many of us, me included, who harbor resentment from years ago over the deaths of relatives, loved ones we think died unnecessarily because a certain level of service weren't available. I'll give you an example. The Prime Minister of Belize, there was a story announcing that he was off to the States or off to somewhere for medical treatment.
Very much so. Yeah. Those who have the money go out
Dean
abroad.
is a friend of mine, and I like him, Dean.
Yes.
But we should be embarrassed to say the Prime Minister of a country is so
Indeed, Lennox Samuels. Yes.
lacking in confidence of the medical care in his own country that he's going abroad.
So
It doesn't exactly set a tone of confidence for the rank and file who are left behind to be treated under these circumstances. And I see it all the time. You know, you go to Cambodia and you see people in the yard at hospitals with IV drips outside and getting awful service, and the Hun Sen, Prime Minister Hun Sen and his crowd, they helicoptered to Bangkok and Singapore for their health care.
Yes.
They don't give a shit about the people below, and so you've got to address these fundamental metrics. And I'm not saying we're going to turn into Johns Hopkins overnight, but there are services that must be raised to a certain credible level that makes it more attractive for expatriates to return, even if it's on a short-term basis or a minimum reduced term. But I think loads of us would be happy to jump on aeroplanes and go down and do what we can. I know I mean I can see doing all kinds of seminars, and it's not just, in my case, journalism, but I could political science, civics, the internet. I am qualified as a journalist in internet, television, print.
It's a very important thing.
Radio.
People using the internet in Belize now at an incredible pace.
I was editor of Newsweek.com, which is a major website in New York, for several months.
Listen to that, Belize.
And you bring that sort of expertise, and I would be happy to share that with my fellow Belizeans, and indeed nieces and nephews who continue to reside there. The danger is those very nieces and nephews keep petitioning me to leave. Can you get me to Florida? Can you get me to England? Can you get
the brain drain continues.
It continues, and it becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy, and it doesn't have to be. We should find a way. It strikes me from time to time that we've got perhaps the same number of Creole Belizeans living in America as are left there, if not more.
Yeah. And examples here in Los Angeles, Black Belizeans, Creoles, are the largest, and coupled with Garifuna, are the largest Black immigrant group in Los Angeles.
There you are.
That's all of the states. That came from Congresswoman Karen Bass, who the Black Diaspora Center in Washington. That's what she told me. She said, "Do you know you all are?" I said, "No, I don't." She says, "Well, you are." I said, "How you know that?" He says, "They vote for me in my constituency." He says, "But why is it that the Nigerians and the Ethiopians?" I said to her, "Well, I don't even think they know that." But we have power, as you speak of, the largest Black immigrant group in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do with that political power?
Well, and
we
that's
have power.
precisely
Governments look at that. They need to tap into that political power. That's power.
I think personally, I think the government of Belize, whatever the party, should in fact set up a kind of an expatriate department in some ministry whose sole job is to identify, track down, and stay in touch with these people, so that even if they don't end up repatriating to Belize, you get the benefits of their expertise. You make it so that they contribute to the country. And it's not like you have to have sent them abroad. They didn't send me abroad, but I don't hold any resentment about it. I'm happy to go back, and I mean, to the same degree that I can go to, as I have done, to Temple University in Tokyo and talk to students in class and give lectures and so on. And I was invited by a Canadian professor who teaches a course there. Well, that's Japan, for heaven's sake. I have nothing to do with Japan. Nothing wrong with Japan. I like the Japanese. I like Japan, but I'm more than happy to do the same thing for the country where I originated. You know, and I think it's a fairly easy fix if somebody paid attention. This is where my suggestion that you actually designate a person whose job it is to sort this out.